for a law firm. I just play a lawyer on a Bitcoin Law Review. I work with local Bitcoins and a bunch of other cool projects.
Good morning, my name's David Silver. I guess it's afternoon now, but it's morning for me. So I am a lawyer from the law firm of Silver Miller from 2015 to 2018. If you saw a lawsuit in the cryptocurrency space, it more likely than not had my firm's name on it. Presently, I am the lead class action attorney in the OneCoin case, the BitConnect case, the Nano case. I had lawsuits against Coinbase, Bittrex, Kraken. I have ICO cases against companies like Menlo Park, GameDex. So I did a lot of the litigation, and unlike most people on this panel who do transactional and regulatory things, I actually interpret the law as it is today. I interpret the law as it is today. I don't tell you what's going to be tomorrow. I'm actually working with what's already existing and where we are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sasha Hodder. I work at DLT Law Group, and I also have a little podcast, the Hodlcast. And my firm focuses primarily on, well, anything Bitcoin related, but a lot of the time gets devoted to money transmission and working with ATMs and other exchanges, trying to get registered with FinCEN and comply with all the state money transmission laws. But it's been a lot of fun watching the industry grow and watching the developments that happen. So yeah, thanks.
I was told that I'm not allowed to talk. My name's Jason Seibert. I've been, well, prior to law, I was a data engineer with the military and switched over to law in 2006, graduated law school in 2009. I swore I would never do anything with data again, and that didn't last very long. For better or for worse, I've been probably doing crypto litigation longer than anybody, and I think I stopped actively practicing 3 years ago. I did some day trading, let's just be honest, okay? So anyway, what I do now is consulting, spot work, projects that inspire me, projects that I believe in. If you have a project that you believe in and you want me to believe in it, maybe I'll represent you. And that's the way it should be, deciding what we want to do with our time. And yes, I was in the SECB Shavers case. Anyway.
Me too.
On the other side.
On the other side.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm Jason. Hi. Good to see everybody here.
All right, guys, we're going to jump right into our topics. We'll see how many we can cover. And, of course, we have to start with the latest big news, and that is from Hester Pierce of the SEC creating something like a crypto harbor case where she's interested in getting given like a 3-year amnesty for crypto projects to kind of prove themselves to be decentralized enough as recently stated by, what was his name?
Jason is my name.
No, I mean, I know that. The SEC.
Hinman.
Hyman, yes, William Hyman. And that was very, very interesting reading over what she plans to do. And it's a huge challenge that I want you guys to tackle. If she's allowing people to create their tokens, what happens to them after, and who decides is it decentralized enough? Because as you guys know, I think that Ethereum is a centralized database even today, as even more so than it was back then. And that is very debatable. And where can this go, and why do these projects need tokens to begin with? So go on. I will let Hoyle wants to jump in first. Sasha, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I've been looking at the safe harbor quite a bit. I started drafting kind of a revision for it. Commissioner Pierce has been really open calling for comments on this, but just for an overview of what actually the safe harbor is proposing is that companies who are interested in issuing a token, right now there's a kind of a stalemate for them because they can do it legally through the channels of Reg D, Reg CF, or Reg A+, but in those cases, the token is stuck for a year, locked up, and it's automatically a security, which means it can't be listed on any of the existing crypto exchanges because they're not registered as securities exchanges. So that's kind of the position we're in, and companies are constantly going to Commissioner Pierce asking for no action help, but there's nothing really, there's no path right now for a company to, launch a token legally that could be traded properly, like traded on the crypto exchanges. So she proposed that they put together basically do a Reg D disclosure statement saying who the person issuing it is, what the token's planning to do, quite a bit of disclosures, and they have a 3-year period before they can, before they'll look at whether or not the token is decentralized. But that's where there's a lot of challenges with it, because what happens in 3 years if it's not decentralized? Does it get kicked off the exchanges and everyone lose their money? How do you define decentralization? As Tone would say, none of them are actually ever going to be decentralized. So, and what do you do with the tokens that have already been launched? As ICOs, do they get to come in under this safe harbor? So there's a lot of questions for it, but it's really an interesting.
So Sash, one of the two interesting things, right? One was when I saw this, I thought, oh, this is Tone's worst nightmare. And two, one thing that really impressed me about Hester is that she did say, like, listen, this proposed rule is not completely, it's not complete, and we're still working on this, and we will publish this and make it public so that people can go through this with their editorial hatchets, I believe was the exact phrasing she used. And I liked that she invited people and really users to come in with help on maybe better definitions, right? And so the libertarian in me is very happy about this, because I'm always wary of the overreach of, agencies like the SEC.
So I'm going to take a different approach. I think Tone would be very happy with this, as with everyone in this room, because let me tell you something. You want to know what's going to happen? If this actually became the rule, you talk about crypto mooning, Bitcoin would be worth 100,000. All these scammy altcoins would be through the roof, because you'd have a 3-year window to steal money. And this would be an absolutely amazing time to be holding crypto early. So from the perspective of we're sitting here of what we can do, everyone here, if you want crypto just to go to the moon without underlying fundamental valuations, this is a proposal you should support.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, though. Because
I just want to be clear,
well,
and that is not investment advice.
But, he definitely has, private motivations, because guess what happens in 3 years?
David's going to get a lot of business.
David's going to get richer.
Okay, so show of hands, who here is familiar with administrative law rule promulgation? Crickets. There's one in the back. And he's kidding. All right, so you have, in administrative law, it's different than creating laws in the legislature, all right? Administrative rulemaking is when an executive agency puts forth the opportunity to create a new way they are going to interpret the delegated legal authority that they have and how they're going to exercise it. So the most difficult thing that this executive body, the SEC, will have to do in all of this is to finally, once and for all, define what does it mean to be decentralized. What is decentralization? So how long, anyone, just call it out, how many years do you think it will take an administrative agency to define the word decentralized? Anyone? 1 year? 21 years. What else? 2 presidential terms. Okay, anyone else? 5 years. So
Never.
The reality of the scenario is that because the concept of cryptocurrency or any crypto project decentralization can't be agreed upon now by people within the space of what is or what isn't sufficiently decentralized, and they are going to be calling for comment and input from the community on what decentralization is until we as a group can decide on exactly what decentralization is.
Can we do that?
Well, sure. We've had some clues, right? Director Hinman said that right now Ethereum is sufficiently decentralized.
I disagree.
I know you do. However, what do we look at that point? From a mathematical standpoint, is there an algorithm that can be created on transactions per second across nodes and node distribution across the network in order to come up with a mathematical number and say that for a certain period of time that mathematical number has been satisfied and continues to be satisfied over a duration of time and has not dipped below that number for a period of time in order to meet at the end of a 3-year time frame that it's sufficiently decentralized to not be a security.
That's always
And
gonna be
Jason,
the
we have
target, too.
done such calculations. And if you remember in Panama, right, we did help with some of that legislative writing, right? So I'm putting this to you. How would you start to define decentralization?
I'm gonna pass.
Legal context.
So I'm happy to jump in because this is how actual lawyers make money. What a horrible phrase, sufficiently decentralized. The word sufficiently means something different to every other person. And when we get legally speaking and the lawsuits get filed, I'm going to say they are not sufficiently decentralized. The company is going to say we are sufficiently decentralized, and no one's going to have
If a company says that, like how it's a company. If they say it, they're by default they're not decentralized. Like this is the irony of it.
It is the irony of
Well,
it, and the bigger irony
Has to be some kind of objective standard.
Well, I
test.
think if we can go back to 2009 and the launch of Bitcoin, on day one, Bitcoin was not sufficiently decentralized. Agree? Hands? Put them up. You can admit it. Yes. Right? But over a certain period of time, there were enough other people that were not involved in the project, people that were not associated originally with creating the code, setting up original mining, that weren't on an inside track on a side group somewhere, that were working together, that you have enough non-associated distribution of hash power or people running nodes that don't know each other to where you have enough disassociated persons that are operating within the network to say it's now outside of the realm of control of the people that first started it. But I don't know at this date what that mathematical number is or that ratio is from day one to today. And I think where Hester Pierce got it right is she said we need to recognize that there are projects that are going to start and they mean to be decentralized, and eventually they may be. But in the meantime, we're going to give them 3 years. This is the proposed number. It's not settled law, not in any way or shape. But just saying maybe if after 3 years you're not decentralized, you've screwed it up, you're still centralized, you're a security, you're done, and that creates all kinds of side problems for exchanges and money transmission and all kinds of other regulation that comes after that.
Let me ask one more follow-up. 2 words quick, and then we'll let Sasha comment on it as well. But what Bitcoin also did at that time where it was not sufficiently decentralized, Bitcoin was also worthless. And not only did it not have a secondary market, it didn't even have a primary market.
I don't disagree.
Me too.
And nothing can replicate that part of the equation. So how come the SEC seems to not care that that is actually relevant in this discussion?
Well, what we had is in 2016, 17, 18, you had your ICO craze with pump and dump shit coins. Am I allowed to say that?
Yes.
Is this a family program?
No, not from listening to prior panels. You should have been here.
All right. I've cursed quite a few times on the law review. The pump and dump shit coins were absolutely money-raising opportunities, right? And it was people that were, the phrase rent-seeking kind of comes to mind at this point. But for the people that are starting those projects and their whole intent is to raise money, make money, run away, never develop a project, they've tainted the entire industry, and those people have no intent to be decentralized at all. as opposed to people that start something, put it out in the world, and they don't try to create a market. They don't try to get on an exchange. They let it organically happen. And the reality is there's maybe 4 people on the planet that will actually download the mining software and dedicate hash power to that. Because it's not going to be on an exchange in 2 days, and there's no chance that it's going to 100x pump within 3 minutes because, thanks to David, Cripsy is dead.
But if any of you guys know where Paul Vernon is, I'm taking his address.
All right, let's get Sasha's take, and then I'll just then will be one last question, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Adela, you-
Oh, thanks, Tone. Yeah, there were a few factors that have been put out as what's sufficiently decentralized, or the word they're using now is network maturity, what that will entail. So if something's going to achieve network maturity, then it has to have a certain number of nodes. The proposal is a certain number of nodes running. They'll look at how many transactions are happening daily. So I think they're going to create, and that's what the call for comments is, to create some kind of guidelines of what that means. But the challenge there is, what if someone meets it at one point, like at the 3-year point, they put a big marketing effort in, or they start wash trading their own trades to achieve this daily volume goal, and then that goes away. Can the SEC, having this 3-year cutoff for them, then is, there's always the looming fear that it could turn into a security and then have to get delisted, and then it might achieve the same goals again and then be relisted. So it's super messy the way that they're designing it, but I don't know of a better way to do it right now in terms of this network maturity goal. Like that, what we need some kind of, if this proposal is going to happen, we need some kind of set criteria, and those criteria, that's what I think the community needs to come in and say, here are the things that make sense for this, or that nothing makes sense at all, just should be regulated as security.
Jason, you want to add something real quick, and then we'll get Adela's take.
Sure. The other thing that we haven't talked about is sufficient decentralization and distribution over the source code, and who has the ability to control commits, and who has the ability to control software updates and code updates. It's not enough to have your network be decentralized from a node and transaction standpoint, but you also are going to have your source actually be open source code along those lines as well. And we hadn't mentioned that till now, and I just
I
wanted
think
to
she
bring that up.
mentions that actually in the proposal. I might
Well,
be wrong, but I think she does.
These were things we were talking about in Panama and over the last couple of years when
Right.
we were addressing this. And I mean, I'm not saying that I'm on a watch list or anything, but maybe they were.
Well, maybe if
listening
you
in.
didn't practice in Panama, you wouldn't be on the watch list. But that being said, there were some other interesting little nuggets, and I'll close my thoughts on this with the fact there's also an ownership issue that she tries to limit who can own and control these new projects that would be under the safe harbor. So it's locking, they're going to, if this goes through, one, you're going to concede jurisdiction to the SEC, which actually in my playbook, not the libertarian, would be a good thing. And number two, and most importantly, I personally would advocate, if this is for consumer protection, and we're going to give special exemptions out for crypto companies who are doing tokens, and we're doing that to protect consumers, it's really easy to do that. Make them go get a bond or insurance, D&O insurance, and make them hold some of the money back to pay for resources that would be able to compensate the investors who are putting their money in, who aren't going to be able to do, I mean, Sasha listed the Reg A, the Reg D, and all those things. The purpose of those exemptions are to let rich people invest. And the ICO boom was fueled by, middle class and new investors who were doing investments, not the wealthy people. And if you want to be a libertarian and say everyone should have the opportunity to invest in opening up the global investments, the way to do that is to make sure there are true consumer protections, and it's easy. The reason why the token companies won't do that is because that would be A, expensive to get bonds or insurance, and B, they wouldn't be able to provide enough true information to a third party to insure them or bond them, because they are going to be saying, I have this grand idea with nothing to back it up. So my perspective is it's a nice thing, and if it does happen, make sure you get in early and get out before the music stops playing.
That's any Ponzi scheme.
I'm sorry, did I not call them a Ponzi scheme to start?
My closing thoughts on this is, I'm no fan of administrative agencies having more power, but at the same time, we did see during that ICO bull run, just insanity, lots of bad actors, a lot of people lost a lot of money and so on. One of the things that Hester does propose is that any such project would have to publish material changes to the project, right? And the actors on the project would have to sort of be vetted. Is that vetted? Vetted, Sash? They would have to be vetted, and if anybody had had any sort of like previous convictions or any sort of dealings with financial crime, I don't think they would be able to. They would not pass their whatever test that they were doing on that, right?
So no blockchain terminal.
Wait, what, Jason?
So from 2017, 2018, anybody here, it's okay, nobody's going to judge you. Did you buy a token or buy into a project as part of your investment strategy? Sure. And did you read
I
the
was afraid
terms
to raise their hair because I'm on stage.
did you read the terms of agreement? Did you
One
read,
person. Can
Did you
one
read
person
the
raise their hand?
paragraph where it said, at any point in time in the development of this platform, if the market lose interests, we hold the right to abandon the project and not refund your money? Did anybody read that clause? Anyone? I got one head shaking here. Anybody hold Tezos?
EOS definitely had that.
Yeah, anybody hold Tezos? Look, I hold Tezos. It's fine. It's a speculative risk.
If I knew that, he wouldn't be on stage.
That clause is in there. And what we're talking about with the SEC proposing publishing any material change is to combat these abusive clauses that were in the terms of agreement through these ICO transactions. What law firm was it, David, that came up with the SAFT agreement?
Perkins?
Cooley.
Thank you. It was Cooley. And
Does someone have a I don't know what that guy won, but they caught. Does he have to throw it back to me now? I mean, I won that trivia contest.
yeah, where's his coffee? February 19th, the SEC just entered into a consent agreement with a ICO that launched in 2017 that was based on a SAFT agreement. Rihanna's got some coffee. She's going to throw it up for you.
Right. I don't want the next topic, but I just remembered there's also a major contradiction in her statement where the whole purpose of doing this is to avoid these tokens being securities. But at the same time, in her statement, she's talking about how the team making the token has to be active in creating a secondary market for that token. Isn't that what you do to make it a security?
Yeah,
How is
they're
that not a contradiction?
They're submitting jurisdiction to the SEC when they do this, but they're getting an exemption like a Reg D or something else. That'll be a special exemption saying they are securities, but they can still trade in this other fashion. And
In unregulated exchanges.
it preempts the state laws too. So if they didn't do it this way, and she was talking about doing it as a no action letter, but then each state blue sky law could come in and we could end up with some mess like the money transmitter situation.
But
where
not the anti-fraud laws.
Yeah, and they're still complying with the anti-fraud, so you can't lie.
And you can't forget, government regulators, they want to regulate. That's their job. That's how they get paid. That's how they get bigger budgets. So what she's actually doing is backdooring jurisdiction into the SEC so they will be able to regulate all these. And then when they have to go to the Congress and get their budgets bigger, they can say, look, we were at the forefront of crypto when it was not as big of a market. We all believe in this room. You're all here because you believe the market's going to increase. Then when the market increases, they are there and they're going to have jurisdiction over all of these projects. And ultimately, the SEC then can say, we gave you the opportunity didn't succeed, and now you are subject to our rules.
Okay, my final thoughts. I'm just going to assume this, but I want to show of hands. Who here has Bitcoin? Under this proposed regulation, do you think Bitcoin could launch today? Show of hands.
Probably not.
And the answer is no. The answer is no. Right? Because they won't allow anonymity in this safe harbor. They do not allow the anonymity
Well,
in the safe
technically,
harbor.
Bitcoin could launch because the creator was anonymous. So there's really nobody to go after. It's just that right now people are they won't buy into it. You have to promote your old coin to be better than Bitcoin.
And the fact that you have to promote means that you are a focal point, you are a control person, you're a person that can be identified under the Howey test as somebody from management and control or reliance.
I mean,
Under today's standards and under today's regulation, Bitcoin would not be able to launch under these same deals. And for that, we can all be thankful that Bitcoin did what it did when it did in order to cause this.
oh yeah, no,
cause
no,
this to
again, like
exist.
anyone can launch a better version of Bitcoin today, exactly like Bitcoin. The thing is, no one will know about it, right? No one will care. Like you have to promote it.
It
Right.
still has to be a security for these things to attach. So if it's launched using proof of work mining, then it's very difficult to fall that into the Howey test, which would, well, that's where we've discussed
All right,
it before.
let's move on. Let's move on to a specific case that the SEC, and like of all the cases for the SEC to go after, other than the really obvious ones, I'm very surprised they went after the Telegram Gram token. Because that one, in my view, this is my non-professional opinion, it was a token that was sold to, I guess, like privately. But the important part to me is this token is not being traded on these unregulated exchanges. It's not even on CoinMarketCap. And yet this is the one that they're going after instead of the 3,000 others that they can choose from that everyone is speculating on in unregulated exchanges. Like, what was the thinking going on there?
So I'm pretty sure I talked about this on stage last year, and I'm pretty sure that I've talked about this on the show. I'm shocked because they hired Skadden Arps, the fanciest law firm in the world, to do the offering. They tried to be compliant. They tried to play by the rules, and the problem is no one knows what the rules are. So the fact that they didn't, well, we can discuss how they raised the money and all that, but they tried to do it from a legitimate aspect. And I think the reason the SEC picked this fight is because as for the last couple of years, they've been doing what's called enforcement actions. They haven't actually fought with anyone. The SEC versus Kick is really the first fight that is actually slowly moving through the court
I was
system.
in a couple fights with them, actually.
And the SEC versus the Kick case is slowly starting to move forward. But the Telegram case presents a unique opportunity for everyone in this room to understand labels don't matter. And the only thing that matters is the economic realities. And in crypto, that's going to be the next fight in phase 2 of crypto. It's going to be the economic realities of all of these investments. No one's going to care where you say your jurisdiction is. Nobody's going to care what you label your tokens as, what you're doing. They're only going to care about the economic realities. I used to say, if you're going to invest in a company and you meet two guys in New York and the two guys are New York residents and they sell you a token and that token is for some country that if I put it on the map, you couldn't point to it, chances are the SEC is going to say that's a transaction in the United States and it's a security. So what they're doing here is they took actually on the 800-pound gorilla and they said, let's fight with the big guys, because if we prove the case against Telegram, everything else underneath is going to be easy. So they are taking the opportunity now to take a case that is going to be interesting for a variety of reasons, but the judge came out very clearly last week. They're actually going to rule, because I think they're supposed to release the tokens in April. I'm not exactly sure of the date, and she said she's going to rule a week before they're supposed to release the tokens. She said you can't release the tokens. I am going to rule, but let me be crystal clear: the economic realities, and that's a phrase everyone in this industry is going to learn. The economic realities are all that matter. And for all the people in the ICOs who paid $250,000, $500,000 to these big fancy law firms, they're all going to repudiate all of the work they did, because they're all going to say, when the judge comes out and say the economic realities are all that matters, they're going to say, oops, sorry, we got it wrong. The judge changed the rules on us.
So what he's talking about is the difference between the Howey test. You've heard Howey, obviously. The Howey test is not the end-all, be-all of securities law in the United States. You have multiple different federal jurisdictions favors the argument that they have. And the way that they get that jurisdiction is that they will claim that the money that was wired or transmitted involved in the transactions fell in the jurisdiction of they want. It's called legal forum shopping. That's why cases were filed in the Southern District of New York. Even though there's no evidence that a transaction ever occurred in the Southern District of New York, they will say that money transfers through wire systems, and New York is the center of banking in the United States, and therefore it must have gone through a computer in New York, and therefore New York has jurisdiction.
All right.
Does anybody think that's some bullshit? Anyone?
Yeah.
Right, but that's how it works. So whether it's Howey or whether it's family resemblance test or anything else, Howey is not the end-all be-all, and as I've said it for years, regardless of anything that's going on, don't forget about the state regulatory authorities because they will come after you as well.
Just to fork off your point a bit. Forked off. Just to fork off that point, I think there's a bit of a bullying tactic as well. I don't know if anybody remembers Ripple. Yeah?
Oh, God. Oh, no, you guys will see it quite often later in the after party during the Scammy Awards. I think they're winning a few awards.
Ooh. I know a Ripple owner in the audience, but I'm not going to call anybody out, so.
One of these days, I'll see someone wearing a Ripple hat or a shirt at a conference. I still haven't.
Me neither. What's up with that?
I think they're just bots and trolls online and paid sock puppets. I mean, or they're too afraid to admit it even at a shitcoin conference.
Right.
That's how bad it is.
But so back to the SEC action here. I think that it was a bit of a bullying move. They're bigger, they're more powerful, they're stronger, and they're gonna go after the big boys like they did with Ripple. Remember what the Ripple action? After the Ripple action, everybody just started going like, "Oh my God, we better get a compliance."
Whoa, but the SEC didn't go after Ripple.
No. I'm talking about FinCEN. Yeah, we're talking
Okay.
about administrative agencies here.
Okay, got it.
Right.
Bad
They
government.
just-
Bad.
David loves government, by the way.
That's
Just so you
true.
know. He loves government. No joke. So FinCEN went after Ripple, right? And right after the Ripple action, what we saw was every money transmitter or possible money transmitter were hurrying up and registering with FinCEN, getting their compliance officers, writing their compliance programs. Suddenly, like, compliance officers went from making like $50,000 a year to like $150,000 a year because this was high demand, right? But ultimately, that agency was like, listen, this is our jurisdiction, money transmission is our jurisdiction, and we don't care if this area is nascent. These are the rules. And I think that's part of what's happening. They're gonna go over big guys because Tone Coin, if they go, you come up with Tone Coin, right? I mean, I love you, Tone, but
Yeah.
I love you.
Maybe we got understanding Bitcoin coming up. We have to test Liquid on the board with something. Maybe it'll be Tonecoin.
Wait, I'm so missing what you're saying here. You're actually saying it's bad that there's now compliance and people with high-paying jobs. I mean, come on. That's your issue? There are
absolutely.
people who are actually now doing KYC and AML, whether you believe it in or not, but there's actual compliance at a organization which Tones thinks is a complete scam, but they actually forced some to do something legitimate, and people got jobs.
Wow, thanks for the fallacy, but let's just go back to the point.
The point, the
So-
point being that that's okay. That's what they're supposed to do.
It's sexier to go over after Telegram. It makes a lot of noise than it would be to go after Tonecoin.
Between talking about something being phallic and sexy, I'm a little triggered right now. I just got to tell you.
Hashtag me too.
And I don't think you
Me
understand that
too.
the bully, if they wouldn't be picking on the biggest 800-pound gorilla, if they were going to be bullying, they'd be picking on little projects to make good law for the SEC if they really were going to be bullies.
That was going to be my follow-up and go to Sasha, that they're, by going after, like you said, going after Telegram, the big one, and it's going to set a precedent. The precedent that it's setting is that if you had a shitcoin that's been actively traded for the last 2 years, now you have more time to try and prove that you have become, sufficiently decentralized. Like, why didn't they go after things that have been around for like way longer than Telegram to prove a real point.
Yeah, I think it's like a crapshoot of what the SEC is going to go after, because they started off with Munchie, which was a $60,000 ICO that was very under the radar, and it was like, why are they? And then they kept going, Paragon, all these they ended up being scams, but there were about 17 kind of small ICOs, and then all of a sudden this big Telegram one, but. The Telegram one's interesting. As David said, they launched with Reg D, and it wasn't, they were following the rules, but I think they did an ICO in Japan, and then they were about to do a real ICO here, and that's where the SEC got nervous. But I love Telegram. and I
ICO in
love
Japan isn't real.
Well, sorry, they were about to do a bigger one in America, but the one in Japan, the SEC should not have jurisdiction over that, and it's hard to say, like, these two Russian guys who are selling tokens in Japan, where does the SEC get involved in that? Obviously, like, some Americans might buy it, but it seems like, there could be American companies with American founders on American soil that the SEC should maybe be more focused on than these, foreign jurisdictions. They really have a long arm at that agency. But I think from Telegram's point of view, the people owning it, Pavel and his brother, they're not going to let the U.S. in the back door of Telegram chat application, and they're the kind of guys that will fight. We see they are fighting. They're not just saying, oh yeah, we'll pay a fine, or we'll get out of here and close shop in America and only service other countries that don't have your kind of rules. So I hope they they keep going strong with what they're doing, and I think all of us probably use Telegram every day, so it's a funny one for, we see lots of these projects that don't have anything, they're just, someone's figment of imagination, but here we have a company with, in my opinion, the best chat application, and, I don't like to see them coming under the gun, especially where they tried to do things, seemingly the right way from the beginning, too.
All right, Jason, final quick thought, and then we'll do our next topic.
So trying to figure out what the SEC is going to do, I think, is it's an ignorant statement. The SEC has many offices in many different jurisdictions with autonomous authority to bring actions within their area. The Southern District of New York, SEC, may bring an action. Boston may bring an action. San Francisco may bring an action. What those different areas decide to do with their time and resources are up to those local offices. I wrote a paper 10 years ago about the realities of negotiating with an administrative agency, in that it doesn't exist. It's not like going in to negotiate for the price of a car. You are negotiating with the person that's across the desk on whether or not they've had a good day or bad day, and regardless, you're saying, that's the SEC I'm negotiating with. No, it's not. It's John Smith, who's pissed off or not that he had good coffee or not on that day, and he's either going to work with you or not. Or it's Jane Doe, and she's going to work with you or not. Trying to decide what the SEC as a whole, which is a huge organization with multiple different offices on any given day, what they decide to go after and what they're not going to, is an exercise in futility. I think all that we can hope to do is have a standard guideline from the commissioners on what is and what is not actionable. And if those different local offices stray from that standard, then you can try to hold them to that. But if you can tell me what the SEC is going to do tomorrow, I'd like to know your crystal ball and how much you want for it.
Just to cap that, the important factor is, especially in crypto, statute of limitations is 6 years, and yesterday's crypto heroes are going to be tomorrow's crypto felons in a lot of circumstances. So, it's first coming. A day of reckoning. Everyone thinks they have passed their day of reckoning. The day of reckoning is still coming.
Ethereum is coming up then.
David, put your status back in your pants.
All right, let's move on from the SEC and move over to another recent development, which was a CEO of a former exchange, which no longer operates, that was predominant, that with coin joins and mixing coins that were then very popular on darknet markets well, it was after the Silk Road, so it was Alphabet and some of the other ones. And he recently got arrested, even though as far as I know, the exchange hasn't been operated in a while. It was Helix Exchange. And what does this mean potentially for the future of mixing?
So I want to say this very clearly. Mixing as mixing. There's nothing about mixing itself, the function, the code, the process, that is illegal. There's nothing illegal about mixing.
Mens rea, baby.
What controls is your purpose for mixing. And that's what they're going after. If you are engaging a mixing service in order to hide illegal transactions or to launder money, now your intent for mixing is the illegal act. But mixing as mixing is not illegal.
But let me follow that up real quick.
The-
Are you innocent until proven guilty in that case? Because if they accuse you, I mean, you can disagree. All right, go ahead, Sasha.
Well, in this case, they're trying to make mixing without first registering as a money service business illegal. So that's where I think it's funny.
Somebody that uses a mixer, I mix, I send my coins to a mixer, I receive mixed coins back. That is not money transmission because that is not funds transferred between two people. That's funds transferred between me, period.
In this case, I think what was happening was it was a custodial mixer. So non-custodial mixing, you're still going to be fine. But if you're doing a custodial mixer, what they're saying is you're sending your Bitcoin. Bitcoin's not fungible. You're getting back a different Bitcoin. Before, when we see MSB registrations, it's always been if you're moving cash into Bitcoin or you're moving Bitcoin into Ethereum, that's what's triggering the need to register with FinCEN. Here, you're just getting Bitcoin and you're getting a different Bitcoin back. And that's where I think it's a really kind of blurry, or I think they're going to have a tough job proving that that is an exchange happening there because if it's cash, $1, you get a different dollar bill, but it's still the same thing. But here they're going to have to prove that Bitcoin is not fungible to win that argument.
So the Bank Secrecy Act on this particular scenario is kind of clear, but still unclear as it is, in that.
Like a true lawyer. It's clear but unclear.
She literally contradicted herself within her one sentence.
I did not. I just disclaimed a little bit. So it's funds, right? Or the equivalent of.
That's the money language.
Right? And so it could be it could be the Bitcoin changed. Right.
Who here actually has a Bitcoin? No, you don't. Put your hand down. You don't understand how it works.
Like a Bitcoin? Just one Bitcoin?
There is no such thing as a Bitcoin or a fraction of a Bitcoin. They are all ledger entries of transactions, of funds going from one place to another. There is no such thing as a physical possession of a damn Bitcoin. Am I correct? Thank you.
I am not your lawyer. I am not your lawyer.
That's the show.
Let me say that one more time. I am not your lawyer. I would not want to be in the mixing business right now. Let me tell you, I am not your lawyer, but I would not want to be in the mixing business. This is not a good sign if this case goes the way most lawyers expect it to go. He is probably going, well, first of all, he's going to settle, like he does, and he's going to take a plea deal because that's 99.9% of all cases. But this is going to go poorly. The government is going to win this one, and it's going to be poor because the government does not want you to be able to mix your transactions so you obfuscates who's actually getting the money and what money. This is not going to go well for him, and this is not going to go well for anyone that wants to be in the mixing business.
So I think you're absolutely right because I think the punishment is going to be sufficient enough to dissuade others from following into the mixing direction, because I think the regulators understand that turning every mixing service into a non-bank financial institution is ridiculous. It would convey the obligation to that entity or organization to collect PII of all its users. And I think they understand how ridiculous that would be. I mean, if I were a bad actor, I'd just start a mixing service and, just.
So one of the things we were talking about in the green room before this, and Sasha, you and I were talking about this, is the economic realities of a T-shirt shop using the Lightning Network, and whether or not mixed coin backing up the Lightning transactions would therefore, if determined to be part of an original illegal mixing operation, whether or not the end result T-shirt shop would have their funds taken from them. And one of the things that we talked about under the economic realities is I don't see the government going after a damn T-shirt shop. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think right now the liability in all of this is not on any users, or it hasn't been so far. It's on the company that's setting up or offering the services. But ultimately, the user can get in trouble if either A, their funds are confiscated, like in the Helix scenario, or like they're using an exchange and that exchange's funds get confiscated, the users suffer. But in the T-shirt scenario, if something happens where, like, Coinbase won't accept coins that have been on the dark market, so the T-shirt company could end up stuck with a bunch of Bitcoins that they can't spend because no exchange will accept them. That's where things can get dicey for the user, I think.
All right, and so what about another way? So something like the Liquid Network has launched last year, and I think the Liquid Network is sufficiently decentralized, and if those disagree, in the very near future, the Liquid sidechain will be sufficiently decentralized. And moving your Bitcoin into Liquid Bitcoin, which only functions on a Liquid sidechain pegged one-to-one with Bitcoin, and moving them back is as good as any direct mixing service out there. So what would the regulators plan to do about that?
Is it custodial? Because the regulators have no jurisdiction over non-custodial as how it stands right now.
It's not custodial. No one is in control of your
Yeah, so
coins.
anything that's non-custodial, you're free from FinCEN or money transmission regulations the way it's currently written.
Well, what about like creating a wallet that like you're still in control of all your coins and you're just mixing them through a wallet, so you always get back the possession of those coins before they go anywhere?
I before anybody answers any more questions, I just want to make sure everyone knows we're not your lawyers. Reliance on anything that anybody says up here is foolish. Regardless,
I will now give you legal advice. I'll
Yes.
translate as we go along.
I love you, man.
I'm so triggered right now.
It all comes back to mens rea. Mens rea in a legal term is what is the state of mind of the person doing it, and do they intend to violate, bypass, or circumvent existing laws? Okay? That's your controlling rubric when looking at your code, when looking at your action. Are you doing this to intentionally circumvent laws? If the answer is yes, don't do it. Unless you've worked out your cost-benefit analysis of asking for permission or begging for, forgiveness, and at the end of the day, you think it's going to be worth it to you. These are all things that we do all the time, right? So if you know you're doing it to circumvent laws, you're doing it to circumvent laws. It's not a good thing. If you are not doing it with the intention of circumventing a law, you're just mixing your own coins. It's coming back. You're just trying to get along. You got some tainted coins before. You didn't intend to receive tainted coins. You're not the devil. You're just trying to get them cleaned up so you can off-ramp the damn thing so you can pay your rent. You're not the devil. This is not a terrible action to do. However, I think if there is going to be regulation or enforcement in this action, there needs to be some form of statement from the regulator that says, okay, you're not the devil. You're a bona fide transaction participant in good faith subsequent, multiple times removed from the illegal conduct, then we're going to allow you to keep your stuff instead of confiscating it. And that I think that
Well,
there
hold on.
needs to be
Here's
room
the
for
problem
that.
with what you just said, though.
Well, if you're
You
fully
knew
on-
you had a dirty coin. You knew you had a dirty coin, and you mixed it because you wanted to clean it up to pay your rent.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but I received it and I didn't know it was dirty. I didn't know.
I mean, how many times
I
do
swore
we
she told
carry
me she was
dirty
18.
cash?
For God's sake.
I mean, cash, for God's sake, you know? Cash is the dirtiest thing that you can, like... I mean,
How much cocaine
that was
is on that
probably
bill?
on
Let's
a
check it
hooker's
out.
ass,
Hold on, I'm gonna find out.
like
Hold on.
4 days ago. Who knows? Not that hookers are dirty, let me just say, by definition.
Did you get this at the Golden Nugget? All right, there's Coke on that. Okay.
Oh, now you've touched it.
I did not mix that dollar. I will give you $1 for that $20 bill. Excellent.
But is it a clean dollar?
All right.
Right.
We got a few more minutes left. Any audience questions? Coming up, Scott. Yeah. Oh yeah. There's no mic. I'll give you the mic. I mean, we have a few minutes. I was also gonna bring that over. I was also going to try and get your comments on that travel rule that was mentioned earlier by another panel. So maybe if we have a minute, maybe Scott's question revolves
Can
on that.
I prognosticate the travel rule based on our beliefs on government?
You know what? Let's get the question and then we'll do it. Go ahead, Scott.
Different topic. Kelly Loeffler, former CEO of BACT, is now a CFTC. Any thoughts on how that's going to affect the industry?
Pass.
Hopefully it'll be good. I mean, she at least understands the industry.
I thought it was very interesting in the Telegram case that the CFTC came in and didn't show more teeth and basically said, we're going to let the SEC handle this. We're just going to take their leftovers. I hope with some better leadership, the CFTC, which is a regime that has some better possible enforcement laws, might be better equipped to deal with crypto. So I think more qualified people at the CFTC who know what they're doing is going to be good for crypto.
This might be a follow-up for Sasha here. So my Edge wallet has multiple third-party ways to trade my Bitcoin for Litecoin. And those are custodial, right? I send it to Shapeshift. Well, that's a sign-up thing, but Wire or these other not Wire, but these other ways of Changeling, there you go, swapping my Bitcoin for Litecoin to Monero back to Bitcoin into my wallet. Would they be held as criminals in the way this thing is going here?
Before she answers that question, here's my legal advice. Don't use the word criminal in your response.
Sorry. Would they be?
And would that violate the travel rule if it's more than $3,000 in crypto?
Yeah, so great question. Edge is non-custodial, so they don't have liability in that scenario, but as soon as they're sending it to the company that's performing that exchange, which might be a company outside the US, so they might be outside of the jurisdiction, they think they're outside the jurisdiction, but if they're doing the transaction through the wires, so through the internet for a US person, the US does attach jurisdiction, but that person is supposed to register as a money service business if they're performing that exchange. But then when the money comes back to Edge, the liability is all on them, not on Edge. And with that travel rule side, Edge doesn't need to collect the $3,000. So between two MSBs, so between two exchanges, they are supposed to send, when they're sending greater than $3,000, based on the FATF guidelines, the whole world now is supposed to, if more than $3,000 is moving, then you've got to send that person's name, financial institution, address. I don't think it's their social, but it's a lot of information on them. Yeah, their
geographical location.
But I don't think Edge is required to collect that as it comes back in because they're just software. I don't think
I like the wallet. Good thing that's not going to come out on the live
The-
stream because you didn't have a
on
mic.
the money laundering side, they have
Paul
to
is
have
not here. Other edge representative, other edge representatives are here. Paul is not. So this would be good. I'll try to get him on a podcast and we'll discuss. Though I like Paul. Let's not do to Paul what we did to Fenton.
any
or Richard Hart.
non-custodial. Yeah.
All right,
Hello,
last
yes.
question.
Yes, I'm going to ask a two-part question. First question is, where does the property right to a Bitcoin exist? Is it in the private keys or the right to spend it on the blockchain, or in the, so, where does the property right exist? And then second question is whether the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code, governs Bitcoin, buy and sale of Bitcoin.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the second question first. The only time the Universal Commercial Code applies is within the exchange of goods or services between merchant and customer. All right. So if the jurisdiction to which the transaction occurred is subject to the UCC, and then of course, regardless of where you are, each state has a different version of the UCC, so you have to look in your state's jurisdiction to see if it applies. Was everybody mesmerized by that legal bullshit?
All right, let's
Okay,
finish
so-
up, guys. Real quick.
So I'm going to make it a little simpler than that. In order for me to in my business model to stay relevant, I have to file cutting-edge lawsuits. In the next month to two, you're going to see a cutting-edge lawsuit suing several individuals that's going to address that exact question, and we're going to litigate the shit out of this in the courts.
Which
Tell them bye.
jurisdiction?
All right, and what was your first question?
Where is the property right in a Bitcoin?
Property right in a Bitcoin, so this is the this is going to be the old school common law version of property rights, which is possession is 9/10 of the law, right? If you have the public key and the private key, you are going to be presumed to be the owner of that, because the original owner of the public and private key has only revealed that from the standpoint of that they have transferred it or willingly done that, unless they come up with good evidence that shows that the public and private keys, both combination, were taken from them unwillingly in a theft scenario, or in David's favorite cases these days, SIM swapping, right? So because you don't have a public record or a code or directory of private key ownership and who that's associated with, you have the assumption that the public-private key combination and the holder of those are presumed to be the owners, lest there be a challenge of wrongdoing, and that's where David.
A much simpler answer, I have a federal court order that says my class action plaintiffs are in possession of 11,000 Bitcoin right now that are held in something like 10 wallets. But we don't have the private key, so everyone in this room would agree that those 11,000 Bitcoin are essentially worthless. And until something happens, and one of the lawsuits is going to be directly addressing that issue, that's going to go to property rights, what applies, what doesn't, and it's going to be well-financed, and we're going to learn whether or not we can truly, get access to those. And my guess would be, as Tone would say, no, there's no one that's going to disagree with that.
So this is still very philosophical as well, and one of our colleagues, Andrew Hinkies, wrote a really great paper on this. So go to SSRN and Google Possession Crypto Andrew Hinkies and have yourself a fascinating read. It's about 14 pages long, but really
And
informational.
keep in mind the name of the conference, guys.
And then on the UCC stuff too, it's I think Wyoming has put it right in their law that if it is if you're holding the Bitcoin in Wyoming, it falls under the UCC, and that's how they kind of escape the the idea is to move things out of the securities laws, because it's in each state the UCC has supremacy over the state security law, not over the SEC. But if something is property, then it's not considered a security. That's why Wyoming made that utility token thing. But when it's under UCC, if something is a good or a service, they've done a lot of work around electricity and software and moving those into the property laws. And it started off with, I think, one state made electricity a property, and then it now is in 22 states that electricity is in property. And if you think of electricity, it's it's completely intangible, and the definition was tangible property, and they somehow got electricity to be tangible because they ask if you can see it, like all the senses. And with the blockchain, I mean, we can see it on the computer. We can't touch it, but I think it follows very closely to the case law that has developed around making electricity property. If we can make token movement property that way.
All right, thank you so much. And on that note, we are over on time, so we have to wrap this up. And please clap for our wonderful panel. Thank you, guys. Just leave the mics.
If anybody has any specific questions, I'm sure the four of us are going to go right out onto the balcony here in about 5 minutes. So long as it's not legal advice, we're happy to talk to you.
Yes, they are going to stick around.
Oh, he already did it. Sash, did you sign it?
All right, let's get our next panel up here. And this is another panel I'm sure all of you have been waiting for. I don't know how many people were waiting for the law panel. But like I said, like I always say on my channel, that's our one show where I really do get to learn the most. And I'm going to hand it off to Jimmy Song to handle our